Welcome to the Data Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run this session here every Friday to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about Data Vault 2.0, Data Vault centric questions, let's say, data-driven questions, cloud questions, MVP clusters, if you have questions like this, data mining, anything data-driven is good. I could answer other questions maybe to some extent, but I'm good at data-driven decisions or data-driven questions. So if you have any question, use the chat here in the client for a live question. You can use the Q&A function here in the client. You can also raise your hand. I'll give you a voice. Don't misuse that. And I'll show you a link to the form today, which you can also use to submit questions, which most people do actually, because it allows me to prepare some slide. I'm not doing that much work with it, copying and pasting it and preparing it a bit. But yeah, up to you guys. If you receive multiple questions, which we have at the moment, I will be cherry picking depending on my mood, depending on my whatever it is. And a good question here is time boxed and works for a good short video, 10 minutes roughly, 10, 15 minutes maximum. If there will be no questions at all, I will talk about the cluster. Haven't done much lately, so thanks for sending and submitting more and more questions, which is cool. And yeah, let me just jump to today's question here. And this is about, and you should see, yep, you see it. So this is about non-historized links, and especially how to identify those. And there's actually a couple of questions coming up for based on this one here. So the client here has a debit and credit table in General Ledger. 1 second. And roughly 1 billion rows or more, and that they store financial transactions with a couple of attributes: transaction ID, account segment, accounting document, accounting period, debit amount, credit amount, and transaction timestamp. And by itself, the transaction ID is already identifying the transaction. That's good. But also the combination of account segment, that's a business key, the account document, another business key, and the accounting period, which is considered here as a reference key because it's a timestamp, right? This combination is also unique and uniquely identifies a transaction. So what's a unit of work in this case, and which values should be hashed in the link hash? So let's talk about unit of work first. The unit of work is really about which business keys should remain together, and wouldn't be my major concern here, because you're not splitting the link here. So you keep it together. Only when you split a link, the question is which business keys must remain together in the link structure, and you can't remove. Well, good point. You could also think about offloading some attributes into the non-historized satellite. That's part of the other question coming up next week, most probably. So which business keys do you keep together? Now the good news is it doesn't really affect you here, because the unit of work, I don't want to say in 100% of cases, but mostly affects standard relationships, relationship-based links. Because here you can capture the granularity, the original granularity from the source using either those 3 business keys or reference keys, or the transaction ID by itself. So you have 2 options of capturing all the records. And if you're not sure if you're violating the unit of work, the idea is that the best test is if you try to reconstruct the original delivery based on your target model. So let's say you model this one way or the other. Are you able to reconstruct the delivery based on this non-historized link and maybe a satellite later? Are you able to reconstruct the delivery without losing any records or attributes and without artificially generating any records? And because you're saying those transaction IDs and these other 3 elements are unique by itself, I assume, without knowing your data, I assume you can reconstruct that. So the unit of work is not a real concern here. But that also explains it, right? Everything I said. Now, so which values should be hashed in a link hash? And let's give you a couple of answers here. In theory, you could get away with transaction ID, right? In theory, you could get away with those other 3 elements, with the account segment, the accounting document, and the accounting period. Now, what I would do is this. First of all, the hash key of a link is the hash value over the business keys from the referenced hubs. So that's why I would include the account segment, the accounting document, and the accounting period. The period is a reference key, I agree, but it goes in the same direction. So I would include those 3. So for me, the question is, do we include the transaction ID in addition? Because also identifying your elements somehow. And here, I would go ahead with the automation thought. In the end, you're not building this manually in the long run. Maybe for now, yes, but in the long run, you're not going to build this manually. So you will automate this. And an automation tool will always include all the hub references for your business keys, right? All the include the business keys of your hub references inside the hash computation, but also include the transaction IDs that you identify or include as part of the identifier. And that's what I would do. I would also add the transaction ID into the hash computation. It will not be a performance impact that much. I mean, yes, the input string will be a little bit larger, but other than that, that's the only impact. So I would go for it. I would add all 4 elements just because the automation tools would do the same. That's what I would do. So I would add all the 4 elements to the hash computation just because the automation tools do it anyway, right? To be in line with what the automation tools typically do. I'm not saying all the automation tools work like this, but it's what most tools, the more they automate, the more they generate, the more they go along this line essentially. And that's why I would do the same, especially because you're going to use automation tools rather sooner than later for your case as well. All right, so that's the short answer here. If you have a question like this, very good, cool question, and it's actually a number of questions along this line. Use this form here at behind sfr.ee/dvfriday. That's where you can submit a question. That's where you can submit maybe attachments, diagrams, pictures of your whiteboard, of your team. Everything works. Everything you submit, we might publish, right? And we have another 2 webinars, one on Warescape, one on DBT. Those you find behind this other URL, scalefree.to/webinars. That's where you can sign up for those webinars, which are on a monthly basis. This here is on a weekly basis. That's why it's called Data Friday. But yeah, so that's the idea. If you can't wait until next Friday, that's when the next session starts, you can also just join the Data Innovators Exchange. That's a forum-style community where you can submit your questions and then essentially get a much faster question from there. They have a little competition going on between the... We co-founded this with Ignition Data in Australia, and there's a competition going on with the consultants there who answers the quickest questions, that kind of stuff. So they're quick at answering, essentially. Yeah, that's the basic idea. Thanks for joining today. Hope you enjoy the weekend, and hopefully see you next Friday again. Thank you, guys.